Hello and welcome to another episode of Reasonably Tactical. We've got a big show today, recapping a lot of stuff that we've went over the past several episodes, as well as some training stuff. So Marty, I'm going to go ahead and let you take the lead since you were the one that put together the whole training program, and let's go from there.
So we completed our first iteration of training out at Rock County Rifle and Pistol Club. And I want to say it was like overwhelming success. You know, we had some little hiccups with weather or people not testing their firearms before they get out there. It happens, you know,
Right.
that's why we do it. So you can see what works, what doesn't work, and end up becoming better.
Yeah. And I'll even jump in on that briefly. I was his RSO and assistant during the whole thing. And frankly, it was one of the best, most comprehensive combo classes I've ever seen because it was broken down into three distinct parts.
Yeah. And, you know, we started with pistol, primarily because a lot of people struggle with pistol. It's not as forgiving as a rifle is, you know, a lot more margin of error. And we moved on to rifle, you know, kind of ramped it up a little bit, did a little bit more moving, and then we did the combo and, you know, started right into it with each one and right into transition drills and then got people moving and shooting. And even some of the older guys, and I can say that the guys that were actually older than me, you know, they did pretty well, man. They handled themselves really well. And
Well, I think it went to something, though. What we learned was something that you said from episode 1, the KISS rule, simplicity.
Yeah, keep it simple. Always keep it simple. And we've had these conversations multiple times when people want to, you know, kind of internet nerd out on different components and replacement stuff. And I always told you, man, I just keep it stock.
Yeah.
Keep it stock because there are engineers way smarter than you or me or anybody I know that they're the ones that make the internals of these firearms where the gas is down to a science and everything happens a certain way. And as soon as you start going in there messing with it, it throws things off, and then you start having malfunctions. And, you know, if you want to customize all the accessories on the externals, you know, your grips, your rails, your buttstock, your optics, by all means, but leave the internals alone because, as we saw, you know, individual, much smarter than me, you know, built his own rifles. But once we started getting a lot of rounds through there, the malfunction started to the point where we had to stop him because it was some detrimental malfunctions.
Well, it was becoming dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you had everything under control. Otherwise, I would have booted him because basically his gun was a NG ready to happen.
Yeah,
I mean, it was ND ready
he
to
was
happen.
having a runaway gun where you know, we thought maybe he had some type of trigger set on it or something, and he swore up and down no, but something was going on with the internals there where it was like, hey, dude, we can't have you shooting out here. And, you know, he was a good sport about it. He's like, hey, I totally get it. Like, I'll just keep doing the pistol stuff, and he continued on, and, you know, good sport about it. But, yeah.
He called me afterward.
Oh, yeah?
And I thought that was interesting because he actually called me. One, he thanked me, thanked your partner for helping out too.
Yep.
And what was great about that is he owned his own faults to me. He was like, look, you know what? I came ill-prepared. And he said, I'm sorry if I slowed things down. I'm like, no, you were fine, man.
Yeah, we worked through it.
Right. But it also did inspire me to look at recce rifles. And I do have a Rise on its way to me right now as we speak because I learned my lesson about, hey, bone stock, keep it simple.
Keep it simple, man. Yeah, keep it simple. You know, like I said, you want to, you know, paint the outside of it and put all types of accessories on, cool. But leave the internals alone, man. I don't mess with them just because I know I'll mess it up. So another thing I wanted to dive into real quick here is it's funny because everyone I know in law enforcement love the show and love the fact that I call stuff out. But, you know, people that aren't in law enforcement are like, man, you're so hard on them. And so I'm going to give a shout out to a couple people I've met in law enforcement that, you know, have been a huge influence on my time in it. First and foremost is this one little lady. She was my FTO, actually my second FTO when I was with the sheriff's office. By far one of the best mentors, instructors I've ever met. And I was her first FTO. And she just, you know, super proactive from the beginning. Was like, all right, let's go. We're going to get it. You know, first thing we did, like, we're going to go serve a warrant today because you haven't done one yet. And then from then on, it was, whoa, stop making so many arrests, Marty. You know, even the supervisor was like, dude, let's try not to make any arrests.
Were they
today.
calling you Officer Angel?
Because it was just, you know, we got into it every shift, and, you know, still remain close friends, and just is, you know, just always been a good friend and mentor. So little lady, if you're out there listening, thank you. Second would be a third shift supervisor I had, man. First impression of him was that he had to have been a former team guy. Like, I was like, this guy had to have been a SEAL before. Just the way he carried himself, kind of persona, easygoing. And a guy that had no problem backing us up. Where other people, because they get bogged down with so much administrative stuff, can barely get out of the office. If he heard something was going on, he'd jump right into it. My first use of force incident, it was me and him,
Really?
While others kind of stood around and watched. And I was like, well, this is a guy that I definitely would trust having my back and would have mine. And just as a leader too, working during the winter out here, when weather got really crappy, he'd cycle people back into the office, and he would literally cook, have breakfast sandwiches for us, or chili, whatever, so that way guys would come in, get something to eat, and then cycle back out.
And see,
a
that's
real leader.
respect.
A real
Right,
leader.
exactly.
Yeah.
You take care of your men, they'll take care of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Goes to the whole mission, men, and me thing.
Yep.
That we were talking about. The next is my current captain down at the PD I'm at. He was an instructor of mine in the academy. Towards the end of the course, he sat me down and was like, hey, Marty, if things don't work out over at the sheriff's office, like I have a job for you. I'll give you a part-time job. You can make your own schedule. The offer's there. And of course, I kind of laughed at him, and I was like, whatever, man. I got this. And fortunately, things didn't work out at the sheriff's office, and I left, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But gave him a call. He's like, come on in, and sat me down, had me meet the chief, and he's like, hey, we got to do a little bit of background stuff, and we got some questions for you, and like, all right, when can you start? And super supportive of his people, doesn't tolerate any nonsense, expects people to come in, do their job, go home, but will also answer the phone at 6:30 in the morning if I have a question. Well, 8 o'clock at night, call him if I have a question. Just that type of leader,
Right.
Just a good, solid dude that cares about his people, empowers his
And
people.
that's something that's huge, is that having that engagement with the team is crucial in any industry. It's not just, military and law enforcement. It's just being a good human. Like we said, don't be a D-bag.
Right. And even a guy that, without me even calling him, will come and back me up. Doing a traffic stop, he's like, ooh, Marty's been out there for a little bit. Let me go see what's up. And, most of the time I give him a thumbs up, and, they just continue driving. But I've had a couple incidents where it's like, hey, boss, you want to have a chat with this guy? And we had this older gentleman, he got froggy. He tried jumping out of his car and, wanted to fight. And it was good that he was there. He was like, hey, you handled it just fine. But, so he could see it too. And, so you never know how people are going to be. You never know if they're going to pull something. So having somebody just naturally show up. And I know people in other departments, officers don't have it. They're like, I hope someone's there to back me, if I call for it. Yeah. And then next I have a training lieutenant that a true professional, man, and a leader who listens to people's concerns or lets them vent, and then is a voice of reason. He hears people out and explains why or why not that'll work. Right. Or at least he hears lets you give your input, and then we'll tell you, hey, thanks for it, but we can't do this, and here's why. But he still lets you voice
that's it
that.
right there. You said it right there. The here's why, as opposed to I'm the boss, you're going to do what I tell you, and that's
this is how we always do things.
Right.
It's like, that doesn't cut it, man. And all that does is rub people the wrong way, creates a hostile environment. Of course, some of our conversations, there's things he doesn't agree with that I say. And, everybody's got that.
Wait, you're saying we got haters? No.
No, yeah. But you can articulate why he doesn't agree.
Oh, there you go.
Like, oh, did you think about this? And there's been numerous times where I'm like, oh, yeah, you got me. I had a family issue, and he was the only leader from that office that truly went above and beyond to help me out, and would answer the phone or check in on me. So, I appreciate it. So there's been a ton of great people that I've met in law enforcement. There truly are. Unfortunately, it does boil down to a leadership problem. And it's something that's not exclusive to the area I live in. I talk to buddies in different parts of the country, and buddies that are in law enforcement, work around law enforcement, train law enforcement, or just interact with law enforcement throughout their normal lives. And there's a huge leadership issue in law enforcement that needs to be addressed. And it goes back to something I learned at a very early age, and it's the America wins mentality. I learned that back in April 2001 when I did my first JRTC rotation down at Fort Polk, Louisiana, the worst place on earth. And during the 2-week exercise, we got decimated nonstop. Just poor leadership decisions, poor tactics. And when we got to the end of the exercise, after just getting beat up for 2 weeks, all the after action reviews, all the briefings with all the commanders was best force we've ever had. America's the greatest. We won. And it's like, were you guys watching the same battles that we were fighting? Like, that didn't happen. We got spanked nonstop. Fast forward about a year and a half, and I went back down to JRTC, but this time we were augmenting the 509th, which are the opposing force. And that was one of my biggest learning lessons because I got to see all the flaws in our tactics. With a handful of people, we were able to decimate tons of just entire battalions, brigades. So it's, if you as a leader can't look yourself in the mirror and say, what are we doing wrong? You should not be in a leadership position. If you cannot admit there is room for improvement, you should not be in a leadership position. So with that being said, this is why I'm leaving law enforcement. I've learned through trial and error that it's best to keep my mouth shut when I'm the new guy. I did that until the nonsense began. It started in the academy where I sat there and just smiled, grit my teeth at horrible tactics being taught by toxic individuals. This started with the director, whose only interaction in the class was to belittle the class, tell them how stupid they were, how fucked up they were. And it wasn't just to the class. You could see a class was going just fine, and this director would come in, and he would upset the instructors so bad that it would throw off the rest of the day. Moving forward in the class, we had 2 young ladies that came to me with sexual harassment complaints because they did not trust the director to handle it appropriately. I went to an instructor. Next thing you know, I'm sitting in front of the assistant director who's ready to, burn it down until we get to the director, who is more upset that these 2 young ladies came to me than actually handling the investigation of sexual harassment. That's wrong. You can't justify that. That's wrong, director. Moving forward from there, I get back to the sheriff's office and begin my FTO. Same thing. Sat there, just absorbed, observed, and listened, and saw just how upset people were in the environment that was actually around me. A lot of upset people, a lot of leaders that didn't exactly have their people's best interests in mind. That being said, there was an incident while I was in the academy where I was on the receiving end of harassment and stalking. Reached out to leadership at the sheriff's office. Just keep us posted. They told me to call the local jurisdiction. I did. It just so happened the chief of that was one of my instructors in the course. This went on for about 6 weeks, 2 months, until it came to a head. Finally, they had to take action after kicking the can down the road. And the reporting was so bad, I was called the day before Thanksgiving and brought in for an internal investigation for falsifying a report. When I went to this police chief, my instructor, and asked him for a copy of the report, he's like, "Oh, you're on your own, bud. I can't help you. You messed up. This is on you." He sent me the copy of the report, and I just got out the highlighter, all the things that I knew were wrong and that I never would have said. So I sat there with the investigating detective the next day from the sheriff's office, and we went through it. And he's like, "Oh, these are pretty serious allegations." And I was like, "Check the body cam footage." Fortunately, the officers that I sat with and did my interview had body cams on. So they were able to tell, no, I was telling the truth. So bad reporting put me in a position where I was in an internal investigation and I got Once again, weak leadership allows this to happen. People don't just write bad reports. Weak leaders allow this to happen. Weak leaders jump the gun and instead of supporting their individuals, wait for them to fall back on them and then investigate them. So ultimately, I left the sheriff's office. Part of it was that investigation left a bad taste in my mouth. It showed that end of the day, the leaders there weren't really going to have my back. What brought it to a head was my daughter had a mental health crisis. I didn't need the job. And that's one thing that law enforcement leadership in the area don't understand. I don't need the law enforcement job. I'm retired from the Army. I have other contract work I do. I do this because I want to give back to my community. So when my daughter's health came into concern, hey, I'm taking personal leave. And HR was great. I'll admit it, HR was great. We'll give you a year. If everything works out, you can come back sooner. Perfect, thank you. The only person that ever reached out was that training lieutenant. Hey, what do you need? What do you need? And outside of this, but we were on a 2-month waiting list to get my daughter some help. So during that time, a former employer of mine reached out. Hey, Marty, heard some things going on. We got a job for you that can help out. They're willing to hire me on right away, pay me what I'm actually worth, and help offset the costs of my daughter's treatment. Not a single person from the sheriff's office offered any help. Me being me and being upfront and honest, called the training lieutenant, told him about the offer. Hey, we got to go talk to the undersheriff. Undersheriff looked at all the paperwork, and you can't have two jobs. Hey, that's your, if that's your policy, that's your policy. Which gets me because weak leaders fall on policy. They don't understand that they're the ones that write the policy, and it's a guideline, and there's always exceptions of policy. But okay, boss, that's your decision. I got to go home and pack. Before I even got home, the training lieutenant called and said they want my resignation, and I needed to come turn in the equipment. So I said, hey, I can bring it to you tonight. I'm packing right now. So he went above and beyond and drove out to my house and, packed up all my equipment. Up until this point, everybody at the sheriff's office was like, man, Marty's best we got because he keeps his mouth shut. He just listens. He does what he's told. Well, I had been taking notes. And after signing the paperwork, here's all my equipment and resign. I said, hey, LT, I got some concerns for you. And kind of addressed some things that I'd seen. And he, kind of gritted his lip and thank you, we'll talk more. So it all worked out though. I reached out to my current captain. Hey, I'm done with the sheriff's office. He kind of chuckled. I knew it wouldn't last. I got a job for you. So went over there. I have enjoyed thoroughly my time with that police department. I enjoy working with everybody in that police department. Both the captain, the sergeant, and the chief are amazing people to work with and work for. This past spring, I was reached out to by the sheriff's office again. They had some SWAT issues. The new SWAT commander came and sat in my bar room at my house, lifted up the skirt, a lot more issues than I thought, and asked for help. I told him, yes, I'll help you, and I'm going to do it for free. And here's why. Obviously, the sheriff at this point knows what my going rate is and what I'm worth, but I'm going to do this for you for free because my kids live here. They go to school here. And at this point, I don't trust anybody to do the right thing to react if something were to happen, and that's wrong. And I shouldn't feel that way, and I want to help you guys get better. So came up with a training plan, started training until the aircraft lanyard guy from last week. He got his feelings hurt because I called him out on his aircraft lanyard and told him to take it off and went and don't know what was said, but I get a phone call in the morning. We don't need your services. Goodbye. There was never an explanation. None of the leadership had the intestinal fortitude to call me and say, hey, this was said. What do you have to say about that? There's always two sides of the story. But this is where that nepotism comes in. This individual, is connected through family, so everything is taken for face value from him. This is, once again, weak leadership, because not only did they weaken their force, they burned a relationship with someone that was willing to help, but at the end of the day, they put the community at risk because then they go back to the same stuff they've been doing that hasn't worked. That was the whole reason they reached out for help to begin with. Now, don't get me wrong. There are still people I'll bend over backwards to help as individuals that reach out to me. But there's certain organizations, as long as they have leaders there, there's no way I would support that organization. There's no way I would back that organization. And that's not right. I've truly been beating my head against the wall on this because I wanted to help. I wanted to make things better. I wanted to see my community get better. And unfortunately, because of weak leaders who are intimidated by people with outside experiences, have made it to a point where I have true resentment of law enforcement leadership, not the individuals on the road, because I know they're doing the best that they can do. You always have those that slip through the cracks, but overwhelmingly, everybody I've met in law enforcement has been stand-up individuals. But I can no longer keep wasting time, effort, and energy on leadership that don't care. All they care about is ensuring their next position, rubbing elbows with people, and protecting their own. I appreciate everybody's opportunity to serve in law enforcement. It's been a learning experience for me. I've met some great people, and I'll continue to help those individuals on an individual basis.
Wow. I know we discussed some of this to the side, but Marty, all I could say is I think that is probably the most noble thing I've ever heard. Truly, it's amazing. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah, and it's, I know this isn't something personal against me. This is how the MO of leaders around here. Yeah. And it's, they lead through fear and intimidation, because if you don't toe the line, if you question anything or bring up stuff outside the norm, they blacklist you. Yeah. And that's not right. So that's where, I guarantee too, is being on the victim side of it, I guarantee there's other people in this area that have received the same treatment. I guarantee there's other people in the area where it's taken a half hour for somebody to show up for a car crash or for a medical emergency. That's not right. So all I can say is to the people listening out there, this is why your votes truly matter. When you hear about stuff like this, when you experience stuff like this, you have to call, write, email your town board, city council, village board, county board, and say, this is not right. And then when it comes to election time, you need to vote for people that'll actually do their job and put the community first and not their own personal interests. This is why your votes matter.
Well, and that's exactly the point. I think a lot of people don't realize, they become disenfranchised. Right, and they give up. They don't realize that, hey, wait a minute here. I can make a difference. I've got a good friend right now. He's in a community you're familiar with. It's not the community we're in. Mm-hmm. And he is so tired with the way that the mayor is doing things. And he said, you know what? He says, I have zero political experience. He said, but I'm a taxpayer. I'm going to run against him.
Yeah, it's, and unfortunately, the way the system is right now, people get so fixated on the national level stuff and all the drama up there. And it's a mess. Right. Both sides are a mess right now, and it is what it is. However, where we can truly make a difference, where we can truly help our loved ones and affect our day-to-day is here in local elections. Yeah. But as we see time and time again, numbers for presidential turnout versus for local elections, like you get, school board elections where less than 1,000 people vote.
And see, and that makes a huge difference. Right. We were seeing this across the country, what's happening with school boards and what's happening with parents speaking out. But I'm glad we're seeing parents speaking out, wanting to take a bigger hand in their child's education. Right. And people forget that. But you're absolutely right, Marty. It falls down to a personal responsibility thing. It goes back to what I learned when I worked in the airline industry. See something, say something. Mm-hmm. And that used to be our adage, see something, say something. And I told you my experiences with some of the people in TSA and the reports I had to make too about them just being completely inept in their job.
Right.
But, this is such an overarching thing because it goes from law enforcement to local political party leadership to schools, everything.
Everything that truly affects our daily life and the lives of our families is stuff that we can actually influence. At the national level with laws, bills, stuff, people get so spun up on that. And it's like, one of the day, it ends up falling on the states.
Yes.
If you haven't noticed, that's been the trend of Congress and the White House we'll let the states decide.
Right.
Well, so should we be wasting that much energy on national stuff versus looking what's going on here? We whine and complain about, well, spending at national level, but how's our taxpayer money being spent in our own backyard? You know, and I mean, you hear the same rumors I hear, where there's fraud, waste, and abuse of taxpayer money locally, and it's wrong. And we can directly affect the local stuff. National level, bridge too far right now.
Yeah, a little hard.
We have to be able to police up our own backyard before we can start that ripple effect. And it's the long haul. You know, it's a long fight to do, but we need people to step forward. We need people to say enough's enough. Like we're not, settling for substandard leaders anymore. We want people that truly have our best interests in mind. And I learned a long time ago, man. And I'm not perfect. I've messed up as a leader. You know, when I was a young rifle team leader, squad leader, I was a dick. You know, like my guys messed up, I would scuff them up, make their lives miserable, because it was that, like, we don't want to mess up. We don't want to disappoint Marty, because otherwise we're going to have physical pain.
But think about that. So let me stop you there. Where did that behavior start from? Poor leadership to you.
Oh, yeah, that's how
and
I
you
was
learned
treated.
it,
Yep,
right?
You messed up, like, you're going to get scuffed up in the sand pit for a half hour. And I eventually learned to, like, wait a second, what am I doing? You know, like, this ain't getting through to them. And even further on, you have hiccups as leaders where you make little mistakes, but you learn from them. You become a better leader. Where I've had, unfortunately, I've had relationships ruined because of mistakes I made as a leader. Right. Where, circle back around, I realized I was at fault and apologized to individuals, and at least we're amicable after that. But, don't hold a grudge. And the last thing is the policy thing. There's a time and place to use policies. And I remember, a quick one. This was when I was a headquarters first sergeant. And we had a strict, because Fridays when we had all the commander briefs and everything, so all the headquarters folks were up from all the companies, and we'd have people from group come down. So you had to be in uniform by 9. And it was my job as a headquarters first sergeant, make sure everyone in the headquarters was in uniforms. And usually it was the higher ups I had to kind of like, come on, boss, like, go get cleaned up. Like,
right.
God, you just came back from a run. But, every now and then it'd be some of the ops guys, and I'd be like, I remember one particular day, it was in the middle of summer at Fort Bragg, so it's 1 billion degrees. And it's like, I felt bad even doing it, but like, hey guys, why are you still in PT uniform? One guy's like, I have a doctor's appointment. One guy's like, hey man, I'm going over to move a bunch of equipment stuff with the supply guys. One guy's like, they're rearranging trucks. And I'm like, all right, dude, it's like, this is not the time to be like, well, policy states. Like, there's always exception to policy, and you use, common sense. But if your default is always, well, policy, you're the one that signed the policy.
Yeah.
That means you can change it.
Right.
But weak leaders, once again, will always default to policy. It's a guideline that we create. It's not a regulation. It's not a law that you have to abide by.
Well, and I think that's a thing that people, I'm just going to say it. I think it's by design. It's pure and simple. Like you talked about the intimidation tactics used by leadership. Yes, it's by design. Our politicians do it by design to make you feel powerless, weak, that you don't have a choice, that, hey, trust in them. They know better for you. Right. And I call absolute bullshit on that until I see a politician or a leader walk into my house.
That leader. Yeah. We use the term loosely. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And come into my house and tell me, well, your dog needs a walking right now. Your wife needs to be banged, and, you need to put food on the table. I'm sorry. Well, first off, I don't want that happening. I don't want leaders coming to my house. But where I'm going with that is that they act like they know so much about us on a personal level.
Right.
And they don't. Just like in your case with law enforcement, they act like they actually know about the people in their community, politicians, their constituents. They're so far removed. I'm sorry. I've seen it.
You brought up a good point. It made me think of, like, when I got hired on, I was the shiny object.
Yeah.
That they wanted to, you had leaders, inviting me to things out in the community to be like, this is our former Special Forces guy, our former Green Beret that we just hired. And they would ask me questions, but it was very clear they were only looking for me to validate their own opinions. Right. And this is everything from training to tactics to equipment to, and it was like, I could see right through that, because ultimately that's why I retired from the Army. I always thought, all right, when I'm a sergeant major, I'll be able to influence things for the better. Well, when I got to that level, it was the same thing with the generals. They would sit you down because of this great thing you did in the past that they heard about, and they just wanted you to validate their own opinions. And if you didn't, they just kind of, whatever. And I saw right through that. I'm like, there is no end to this. And that's what's happening here is People wanted to, show off their shiny object, but in reality, they didn't care. They didn't want any input.
So here's a question, I guess, so we could try to help some of our viewers understand what they need to do, how they can stop this, what they can do to be a positive force of change. I mean, where does it start and where does it end?
So I'd say, first off, get involved in your local community. Even if it's devoting an hour a week to volunteering for an organization. Schools, churches are always looking for volunteers. Get involved in your community. That way you start to hear some of these issues other people have, and you'll find out a lot of people share the same frustrations as you. And this isn't something that's bound to one political side.
Not at all.
Like everybody has the same frustrations of not being heard or not being taken care of the way they should be. And then at that point, as you share stories, reach out to your elected officials and say, hey, this is something that we're seeing in our community. We don't like it. We want to know what you're going to do about this, how you're going to fix it.
Correct.
And if those elected officials don't act on it, if they just blow you off, then it's time to look at finding somebody to run against them and getting everybody out to vote.
Right.
Because the end of the day is, if we want change, we have to do it by vote.
Agreed.
And we look at the numbers. This used to be a very, very one-sided county, and that gap's closing.
Yeah.
And people whine and complain, well, I'm not going to vote because it doesn't matter. Well, this is why it matters, because
Right.
pretty soon it's going to be the other way, and good, bad, or indifferent. That's just the reality.
Exactly. And that is truly, you're right, the best way to fight back. And, I implore upon people, and I'll address you guys right now. I get it. You hear things about fraud, you hear things about this, and you go, why? That's loser talk. I'll just say it right now. Does it mean it happens? Absolutely. In some scale or another, it does. I'm from Chicago. Trust me on this one. It happens.
It's the epicenter of it.
It is the epicenter of it. But where I'm going with this, and what Marty is trying to say, and what I'm trying to implore upon all of you that are watching and taking today's episode, is here's a man that dedicated himself to serving his country and his community. And I'm not trying to be a mark for you, man. I'm just calling it like I see it, that if you have somebody that cares that much and he said, I've had enough, it's time for change.
Yep. I think on that one, appreciate all the viewers. Like to hear your guys' opinions on this stuff. Please, comments, email us, reach out. Most of you got my number. Let me know what you think, man. And, for those of you that's still involved with stuff, you need help, my door is always open. Reach out, and I'll do whatever I can to help you with what you need. Have a good one.